Walk out before I embarrass you, old man. That was the first thing I heard as I tightened the laces on my sneakers. The gym was crowded that evening, music thumping, weights clanging, people watching without trying to look like they were watching. My wife's trainer stood over me, flexing his arms, his voice raised just loud enough for everyone around to catch it. "You're not man enough for her," he added, his grin sharp, his chest puffed like he had already won something. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I kept tying my shoes, pulling the knot slow and deliberate, letting the moment breathe. 12 years in the Special Forces had taught me that the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one who talks the loudest. It's the one who says nothing until the right time. My name is Michael Cole, 41 years old. For more than a decade, I served overseas, from desert operations to city raids, surviving places where hesitation could get you killed. When I came home, I thought I was done fighting. I opened a small security consulting firm, bought a modest house in the suburbs, and tried to build a life that didn't depend on discipline and combat. My wife, Emily, thought a gym membership would help her unwind from work stress. I didn't argue. She found a trainer named Ryan who looked the part, tall, tanned, all muscle, the kind of guy who makes a living showing off what other men pay to build. At first, I didn't think twice about it. Then I noticed her late nights, the way she lingered at the gym after sessions, the sudden change in tone when his name came up. I kept silent. I watched. Special Forces training teaches you never to move on suspicion alone. You wait, you gather, and then you strike. That night in the gym, when Ryan squared up to me in front of a crowd, it was the confirmation I had been waiting for. His arrogance wasn't about fitness. It was personal. He wanted me to know, and he wanted everyone else to see it. I finished tying my shoes and finally looked up at him. I didn't speak. I didn't rise to his bait. My silence unsettled him more than any insult I could have thrown back. People around us shifted, sensing tension, whispering. I stood, adjusted my sweatshirt, and walked past him without a word. I could feel his smirk burning into my back, but I didn't break stride. Walking out that night wasn't retreat. It was reconnaissance. I'd seen enough. I knew exactly what kind of man I was dealing with, and I knew he had already made his first mistake, underestimating me. What Ryan didn't realize was that I never needed to prove I was man enough. I just needed time. And when the right time came, it would already be too late for him. The night after Ryan's little show at the gym, I sat alone in my office with nothing but a notebook and a pen. Old habits die hard. When you're trained to survive in hostile environments, you don't react in the heat of the moment. You take notes. You plan. On the first page, I wrote 3 words in block letters: observe, record, respond. Emily came home late again. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, the faint sound of her bag hitting the counter. She didn't come into my office, didn't ask if I was awake. That told me more than any excuse she might have offered. Distance in marriage isn't measured in words, it's measured in silence. And ours was growing wider every day. The next morning, I started my observation phase. I drove Emily to the gym under the excuse that I had errands nearby. I parked across the street and waited. Ryan greeted her at the door, too close, his hand on her arm longer than necessary. I wrote it down. Every detail matters when you're building a picture of the truth. By noon, I was back at my firm. My clients expected professionalism, reports on vulnerabilities in their security systems, strategies to prevent breaches. It wasn't much different from what I was doing at home, identifying weak points, mapping out patterns, preparing a response. The difference was that this time the breach was personal. That evening, when Emily said she was going back to the gym for an extra session, I didn't argue. I told her I had work to finish and stayed behind. But as soon as she left, I followed. I parked in a dark corner of the lot, watching through tinted glass. 2 hours later, I saw them leave together. Not as trainer and client. Not as casual acquaintances. As something more. They didn't see me. They wouldn't. Not yet. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't confront him either. Confrontation is noise, and noise is sloppy. Instead, I went back to my office, pulled out a small hard drive, and began compiling everything. Timestamps, photos, notes. A digital dossier. The kind of file that doesn't just tell a story, but proves it beyond denial. 3 days passed like that. Emily slipping further away. Ryan growing bolder. And me, silent, patient, building my case. On the 4th night, I returned to the gym and stepped inside. I kept to the back, blending into the crowd. Ryan was there, laughing too loudly, showing off for anyone who would watch. When his eyes landed on me, the grin faltered for a second. Just a second, but enough. He knew I wasn't gone. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I finished my workout, left without acknowledging him, and drove home calm, steady, silent. What he didn't know was that every move he made was now in my hands. And when the time came, all the arrogance in the world wouldn't save him from what silence had already built. By the end of that week, Ryan's confidence had turned into something sharper, something closer to recklessness. He wasn't just training Emily anymore. He was flaunting her. They walked into the gym together, left together, lingered in the parking lot long enough to invite whispers. He thought whispers made him stronger. He didn't realize they were making him careless. I stayed in the background. I lifted weights, ran laps, nodded at the regulars. No outbursts, no challenges, no scenes. But every time he raised his voice loud enough for me to hear, every smirk he threw in my direction, I recorded it in my mind. The louder he got, the quieter I became. And that imbalance worked in my favor. Emily avoided eye contact with me at home. She busied herself with small talk, schedules, surface-level chatter that tried to hide the truth. I let her talk. I let her fill the silence with meaningless words. I didn't push, didn't demand explanations. She didn't know it yet, but I already had more answers than she could ever admit. One night at the gym, Ryan tried again to provoke me. He stood near the benches, arms crossed, telling another member how some men pretend to be tough, but can't satisfy their wives. His words weren't subtle. They were meant for me. The member laughed nervously, glanced at me, then walked away. Ryan kept staring, waiting for me to rise, to react. I didn't. I finished my set, racked the weights, and walked past him without a glance. That silence unsettled him more than any punch could have. Back home, I added more to my file. I had time-stamped video from the parking lot, discrete photos from across the street, gym surveillance I'd legally obtained through connections in my security business. Piece by piece, the story was airtight. Ryan believed he was untouchable because he was loud, because he was visible. But visibility is weakness when the wrong eyes are watching. The following day, one of his fellow trainers approached me quietly. He said Ryan was getting sloppy, missing client appointments, bragging too much, picking fights. He didn't like the way it reflected on the gym. I just listened, nodded, and thanked him. I didn't ask for the information, but I accepted it. People naturally turn toward the quiet man when noise gets out of hand. By then, I didn't need to provoke Ryan. He was provoking himself, digging his own hole deeper with every word, every move, every careless display. My silence wasn't passive. It was pressure, the kind of pressure that builds slowly until the walls crack. And I could already see the cracks forming. The confrontation I knew was coming finally arrived on a Thursday evening. The gym was packed, the kind of crowded night when sweat and noise fill every corner. I was midway through my workout when I saw Ryan approaching. He didn't wait for privacy. He wanted witnesses. His chest was puffed, his grin too wide, his steps heavy like a man putting on a show. He stopped a few feet from me, loud enough for those nearby to hear. He said a man should know when he's beaten. He said I was clinging to something that wasn't mine anymore. He leaned closer, dropping his voice just enough that only I could catch the next line. She's already chosen. I didn't respond. I didn't even look up. I adjusted the weights, tightened my grip, and finished my set. The silence stretched between us, and with every second I refused to answer, his smirk twitched closer to a snarl. He wanted noise. He needed it. Without it, he looked smaller. When I finally stood, I didn't face him. I picked up my water bottle, walked past, and left him standing there with the audience he'd gathered. The whispers that followed him weren't the admiration he'd been expecting. They were doubt, curiosity, and maybe even pity. That's the thing about silence. It shifts the crowd. People don't rally behind arrogance when it collapses under its own weight. At home, Emily tried to act normal. She asked about dinner, about my day, about small things that didn't matter. I answered only with short replies. Not cold, not cruel, but measured. She knew something was changing. The distance wasn't her choice anymore, it was mine. Later that night, I reviewed the footage I had quietly pulled from the gym's cameras. Ryan's attempt at humiliation was preserved from 3 different angles, complete with audio. His posturing, his threats, my refusal to engage. Proof of who he was, and proof of who I was not. The following day, I kept my routine as usual. Work, meetings, paperwork. Outwardly, nothing had changed. But inside, the pressure was building, and it wasn't on me. Ryan's behavior was catching attention. Another trainer pulled me aside, saying management had received complaints about him. He was too aggressive, too distracted, more focused on drama than training. I just nodded. I didn't offer an opinion. I didn't need to. The cracks were widening without my hand. That evening, when Emily didn't come home until late, I didn't ask questions. She avoided my eyes, her voice thin as she explained she had stayed late at the gym. I didn't argue. I simply wrote the time down in my notebook. Another detail. Another pattern logged. Ryan thought confrontation would shake me. He didn't understand that silence was my strongest weapon. And now he was the one unraveling, word by word, step by step, in front of everyone who once admired him. And I hadn't even started yet. By the start of the next week, Ryan's bravado was starting to backfire. The same trainers who once laughed at his jokes now shook their heads when he wasn't looking. Clients whispered complaints, saying he was too distracted, too focused on personal drama. Management had noticed. His perfect image was cracking, and he was the one hammering the edges loose. I didn't help him. I didn't sabotage anything. I just kept showing up, silent, steady, consistent. I worked out in the background, never raising my voice, never taking the bait. Every time Ryan tried to provoke me, my calm became another reminder to everyone around us of just how different we were. One night, I walked into the gym and saw him pacing near the entrance, his hands restless, his smile forced. He greeted Emily too loudly, too possessively. People noticed. I noticed. He caught me watching, and his grin flickered. He was starting to realize that his noise wasn't winning him allies anymore. Back at home, Emily seemed restless too. She avoided conversations that mattered. She filled silence with chatter about errands, schedules, and plans for the weekend. But her eyes betrayed her, uneasy, darting away from mine whenever I looked too long. She was caught in the middle, and though she didn't say it, I knew she was beginning to feel the weight of what she had chosen. That evening, I sat alone in my office and organized the evidence. The photos, the timestamps, the video clips, all laid out in order. It wasn't anger driving me. It was precision. Like setting charges on a bridge, each detail had to be placed exactly right before you walked away and waited for gravity to do the rest. The next day, Ryan slipped up publicly. I was finishing a workout when a client accused him of missing an appointment. He raised his voice, defensive, snapping back at the man. The client stormed out, muttering about finding a new trainer. The room went silent for a moment, then filled with whispers. Ryan looked around, expecting someone to back him up, but no one did. I kept my eyes on my weights, steady and unmoved. He caught sight of me in the mirror, and the anger in his reflection told me he knew exactly who had the upper hand now. That night, Emily didn't come home until midnight. She walked straight to the bedroom, dropped her bag, and didn't speak a word. I stayed in my office, reviewing the latest footage, marking down her return time, adding another entry to the record. The silence between us was colder than any fight could have been. Ryan thought he was building a victory by being loud. What he didn't understand was that his own noise was destroying him piece by piece. And I was just waiting, quiet and patient, for the moment when it all came crashing down. It was only a matter of time before Ryan snapped. He'd been losing ground for weeks, clients walking away, whispers circling, Emily growing quieter around him. His ego couldn't handle silence, and when silence starts suffocating a man who lives on attention, desperation takes over. It happened on a Friday night. The gym was buzzing, every bench and machine full, music blasting overhead. I was finishing my set when I saw him pacing by the lockers, his eyes locked on me. He wasn't smiling this time. He looked cornered, and cornered men lash out. He walked straight toward me, too close, his voice sharp enough to cut through the music. He accused me of following Emily, of spying, of spreading lies about him. Heads turned. People stopped mid-rep, pretending not to stare. He wanted a scene. He wanted to drag me into his noise and make me lose the one weapon he couldn't fight, silence. I didn't move. I wiped the sweat from my face, placed the towel neatly on the bench, and started tying my shoes. My calm only fueled his anger. He leaned over me, fists clenched, breathing heavy like a man preparing for a fight. He said I was finished, that Emily was already his, that I was too weak to stop it. I stood up slowly, looking him in the eye without a word. Then I turned, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, the silence stretched. The crowd watched him, not me. They saw his rage, his fists, his trembling voice. They saw me walking out calm, collected, unshaken. That contrast said more than anything I could have spoken. Back home, Emily tried to ask where I'd been, what had happened, but her words bounced against my quiet like stones hitting steel. She didn't know that the entire gym had just witnessed Ryan's mask slip. His reputation as the confident trainer, the man who strutted through the place like he owned it, was gone. He had lost control in front of everyone. Later that night, I reviewed the gym's security footage again. His outburst was captured in clear audio and video, his accusations, his threats, my silence. I saved the file, labeled it, and added it to the growing archive. Evidence doesn't just expose the guilty. It protects the innocent. The next morning, I went for a run before dawn. The city was still asleep, the streets empty, the air sharp. With every step, I thought about Ryan, about how noise was his only weapon, and how it had already turned against him. Men like him burn fast and bright, but flames that high don't last. Silence smothers them until nothing is left but smoke. Ryan didn't realize it yet, but he wasn't fighting me anymore. He was fighting the quiet, and the quiet always wins. By the following week, Ryan's empire of noise was crumbling faster than he could patch it together. His clients weren't showing up anymore. The whispers that once fed his ego had turned into judgment. People said he was unprofessional, unstable, dangerous even. The same crowd that used to watch him like a star now avoided his gaze entirely. I didn't have to move a muscle. I just showed up, kept my routine, and let the silence do its work. When I walked into the gym, heads nodded toward me, quiet respect passing where before there had been indifference. They had seen enough. They knew who had lost control and who never needed to prove anything. Ryan, though, couldn't stop spiraling. He grew louder, more erratic, desperate to reclaim ground. He started boasting about clients he no longer had, about deals that didn't exist, about Emily being his, as if speaking it out loud could make it real. But the more he talked, the more everyone saw through him. At home, Emily was different too. The spark of rebellion that had carried her into Ryan's orbit was dimming. She was restless, distracted, but there was no triumph in her eyes anymore. Instead, there was unease. She asked questions without asking, circling around the truth, waiting for me to break the silence. I never did. My restraint wasn't punishment, it was clarity. She needed to sit in that silence long enough to see what it revealed. Midweek, my lawyer called. He'd heard from one of his clients who happened to be a board member at the gym. Management was reviewing complaints against Ryan. They had video evidence of his outbursts, his threats, his aggression. I didn't have to give them what I had saved. He was hanging himself without my help. That night, I drove past the gym after hours. The lot was empty except for Ryan's car, parked crooked, lights still on inside. I watched from the shadows as he sat alone, hands gripping the wheel, his head bowed forward like a man praying to a god who had stopped listening. I didn't pity him. He had chosen arrogance. He had chosen noise. And now silence was choosing him. Back home, I opened the file on my laptop one more time. Dozens of entries, videos, photos, timestamps, patterns. A complete record of how one man's arrogance destroyed him. I didn't need to release it yet. The beauty of evidence is patience. It waits until the exact moment it's needed. Ryan thought I was the enemy he had to beat. He was wrong. The real enemy was time, silence, and the truth he couldn't outrun. I was just the man steady enough to hold the line until it caught up to him. And it was catching up fast. The final crack came in public, exactly where men like Ryan are most vulnerable. He had built his identity on attention, on being seen, on controlling the room with volume and muscle. So when he lost that, the collapse wasn't private. It was loud, chaotic, and witnessed by everyone. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the gym at its busiest. I was finishing my run on the treadmill when Ryan stormed in late. His usual confidence was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his movements jerky. He barked orders at his clients, but none of them listened. A few even walked out mid-session. That was when I knew the end was close. He spotted me across the floor and froze. For a second, I saw the flicker of something he hadn't shown before, fear. But it was gone as quickly as it came, buried under rage. He marched toward me, shouting that I had ruined him, that I had poisoned Emily against him, that I wasn't a real man. His voice carried over the music, over the weights, over everything. The gym went silent except for him. I stepped off the treadmill slowly, wiped it down, and picked up my bag. I didn't look at him. I didn't speak. I walked past him the way you walk past a stranger ranting on the street. To me, that's all he was now, a noise I had no reason to acknowledge. The silence from me cut deeper than any insult. People watched the two of us, their eyes moving from his red face to my calm stride. They saw the difference. He was unraveling. I was composed. He screamed louder, fists clenched, veins straining in his neck. Still, I didn't respond. I walked out the doors without a word, leaving him shouting into a void that no longer cared to listen. Later that evening, Emily came home, her face pale. She said Ryan had been suspended. Management had enough complaints, enough footage of his behavior, and they couldn't ignore it any longer. She didn't ask me if I was involved, but her eyes searched mine as if she already knew. I gave her nothing. Silence again. That night, I sat in my office and closed the file I had been building for weeks. I didn't need it anymore. Ryan had destroyed himself without me releasing a single piece of evidence. His arrogance had been his weapon, and it turned into the blade that cut him down. The war was over in everyone else's eyes. But for me, it wasn't finished until I decided it was. And I still had one final move left. When Ryan was suspended, most men would have stopped there. They would have called it justice, taken a breath, and moved on. But I knew better. A man like him doesn't stay quiet after being exposed. He tries to claw back whatever scraps of control he can, even if it means burning everything around him to ashes. That's why I didn't put away the evidence. I kept it ready. The silence that followed his suspension was deceptive. Emily grew distant, her phone always close, her words clipped. She didn't say his name, but she didn't have to. I knew she was still tethered to him, still chasing something that was already gone. It wasn't anger that filled me then, it was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you see the battlefield from above and know the enemy is already cornered. 2 nights later, Ryan tried to reach me. Not face-to-face this time, but through Emily. She came home late, said he wanted to meet, said he needed to explain himself. I didn't answer. I didn't agree. I simply looked at her until the words dried in her throat. That silence told her everything she didn't want to hear. His fight was with himself, not with me. But I still made my move. The next morning, I slipped the hard drive with all the evidence into a plain envelope. I sent it directly to gym management and to a few of his wealthier clients. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. A clean break has to be absolute. When men like Ryan lose, they always try to twist the narrative, always try to convince someone that they were the victim. I wasn't going to give him that chance. By afternoon, the call started. Management informed me he was terminated permanently. The clients thanked me quietly, relieved they had avoided more embarrassment by cutting ties with him early. Ryan had no one left to lean on. He wasn't just suspended anymore. He was erased. That evening, I walked into the gym one last time. Not to gloat, not to celebrate, just to finish my routine. People looked at me differently now. Some nodded with quiet respect. Others avoided my gaze, not wanting to get caught in the fallout. But the message was clear. The noise was gone. The silence was mine. At home, Emily finally broke down. She said she didn't recognize him anymore, that the man she thought she admired had turned into something ugly. She asked me if we could move past it. I didn't answer. I let the silence sit between us, heavy, final. She needed to feel its weight before she could understand what it meant. Ryan thought he was fighting me, but the truth was, he had been fighting the quiet all along. And the quiet doesn't lose. The end came quietly, the way it always does when the noise finally burns itself out. Ryan didn't show up at the gym again. His car was gone from its usual spot, his locker emptied, his name stripped from the roster on the wall. For a man who had built his life on being seen, his disappearance was louder than any scene he had ever caused. I didn't celebrate. There was no victory lap, no satisfaction in watching him fall. I had learned long ago that revenge isn't about noise. It's about restoring balance. And balance doesn't announce itself. It settles in like the still air after a storm. Emily tried, for a while, to repair what she had broken. She spoke softer, stayed home more, made dinners she hadn't bothered to cook in months. But every gesture felt like a patch over a wall that was already collapsing. She asked me one night if we could start fresh, if we could forget what had happened. I looked at her, steady and silent, until she lowered her eyes. Some things can't be reset. Some cracks never close. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I simply packed a bag the next morning, placed my house key on the counter, and left without a word. No fights, no scenes, no explanations. Just silence. Because silence carries more weight than any shouted goodbye. Weeks later, I heard through whispers that Ryan had left town. He tried to start fresh somewhere else, but his reputation followed him like a shadow. You can't run from who you really are, not when the evidence is carved into the way people remember you. His downfall wasn't my doing. It was his own arrogance reflected back at him. I had just held up the mirror. As for me, I rebuilt quietly. My business grew stronger, my circle tighter. I surrounded myself with people who understood that respect isn't earned through volume or vanity. It's earned through action, through discipline, through the kind of silence that never needs to shout. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to that first moment in the gym. The smirk on his face, the words he spat out like he believed them. You're not man enough for her. I remember tying my shoes, calm, deliberate, and walking out while he strutted for the crowd. He thought that was his victory. He didn't realize that was the moment he lost. Because the quiet man doesn't fight on their terms. He doesn't play their game. He waits, he plans, and when the time comes, he ends it without ever raising his voice. And when it was finally over, all that remained was silence. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.